This is a tutorial on how to solve X-linked genetics problems. So if you have a trait or a disorder that is called an X-linked trait, that means the gene is on the X chromosome. And right now we're going to talk about X-linked recessive traits. So if you're working on X-linked traits, you have to keep track of the X and the Y chromosomes when you solve the problem or do the Punnett square. And the table right here shows you that if you have a genotype for females, obviously they will have two X's. And then for males, there will be an X and a Y. So for females, because there's two X chromosomes, you can have either homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive for any specific gene. But for males, they only have one X chromosome, and so it will either be dominant or recessive, and they don't have a heterozygous condition. So the first trait that we're going to go through, or the disorder we're going through, is called hemophilia. So there's various types of hemophilia, but basically it means that there was a mutation in the gene that determines the protein blood clotting factor. And people that have hemophilia then do not make either enough of the protein or they don't make the correct protein shape. And so the bleeding doesn't ever clot and they will bleed for a long time. Okay, so anyway, hemophilia and hemophilia A and hemophilia B are something that happens throughout the world, with hemophilia A being more common. Okay, I don't expect you to memorize the symptoms or the inheritance patterns of any of these diseases, but I just bring them up because you might have heard of these before in the population. So we're going to try to go through several different problems to make sure you understand the approach to solving these problems. Okay, so my first problem is that hemophilia is the recessive trait, and female Mason is a carrier, whereas Mohammed, the male, has normal blood clotting. And so we want to know what are the chances that they will have children with hemophilia. So the first thing I would do is to actually draw the pedigree to help me decide what the parent genotypes are. Maybe you could just see it from the problem, so that's fine. But I tend to draw my pedigrees. Okay, so because the female is heterozygous, I know I can write that down, and then the male has normal, so I know that he has to have the dominant allele. Okay, so again, I always write down my alleles, and then I write down what the parents are. Then I set up the Punnett square, and so you should write out the Punnett square and fill in the blocks right now. Okay, so hopefully you got that, and then try to answer the question then, what are the chances that their children will have hemophilia? Okay, the second problem we're going to do is on red-green color blindness. And again, this is an X-linked recessive trait. And so the problem is Maria has a father who is colorblind and a mother who does not have any history of color blindness. And Maria marries Jose, who is colorblind, and they're now expecting twin boy and girl. So you need to figure out the genotype of Maria and Jose, and then the probability that their children will be colorblind. So again, I write down the alleles of what I know, and then I draw the pedigree to kind of help me figure out the genotypes of every person. Okay, so I would go through and write out Maria, Jose, and then put in Maria's mother and Maria's father, and then fill in the alleles, as many as I could. So hopefully you came up with this genotypes. And then now that we know Maria is heterozygote and Jose is recessive, then you can fill out the Punnett square. Okay, so again, take a minute to try to work this out on your own and write down your answers, and then come back to answer, check the answer key. Okay, and so here's the answer key. So in this case, it turns out it doesn't matter what gender the children are, they will all have 50% chance of becoming colorblind. So the next big idea that we want to go through is that some genes or some traits or disorders are inherited or caused by a dominant allele on the X chromosome. And so if that is the case, you need to look at these genotypes and then and understand that the phenotypes will occur. So for females, if you have homozygous dominant or heterozygous, the female will display the trait. And if you have a male with a dominant allele, then obviously they will display the trait. Okay. So my problem here is something called vitamin D resistant rickets. So rickets basically means that the legs look like they're bow-legged, and in this particular disease, it's because that your kidneys are taking away the phosphates, and so you end up with weak bones. Okay, so it turns out this disease has quite a varying types of phenotypes, and so John happened to be healthy while he was a kid, and then it was only until he was an adult that he started to get the rickets symptoms. And his wife Joanne has no family history of this type of rickets. So you need to figure out what the genotypes of John and Joanne are, and then the probability that their baby will have rickets. Okay, so same idea. Write down the alleles, do the draw the pedigree if that helps you, and then figure out the Punnett square. So hopefully you wrote this out, and then you're going to do the Punnett square. So again, pause and try to figure out the answer before you get to the answer key. Okay, and so here we want to show you that if you don't know the gender of the kids, then all of the it will be actually 50% of all kids are going to have the disease. Okay, so up here. But if you're looking at the girls only, if you knew that the baby was a girl, then you only look at the girls and you could see that 100% of those girls are going to be affected with rickets. And if you knew that the boys, then it would only be 0%. Okay, hope this helped.